If you live with the constant fear and shame of saying, I have borderline personality disorder with your out loud voice, anxiety ridden that you might be locked up if you do, if you've ever felt so alone and isolated thinking, there's no other person on the planet that can understand what I go through every minute of every hour, and the message playing on repeat in your head is, I can't do anything right. If you have frequent thoughts of, I don't matter, everyone will be happier if I'm not around, I should just end it, only to fumble those efforts too, you're not alone, and you've come to the right place. Welcome to I Can't Even Kill Myself Right, your safe space. Here we offer a raw, slightly humorous, and compassionate inside look at what it's like to be a BPD warrior, while demonstrating this disability is not a life sentence. And oh yeah, there's some learning and mindfulness nuggets too. Before we jump into today's episode, it's important to know there might be explicit language and content that could possibly be distressing or triggering. If you choose to listen, please consider using the resources on our website, showmegrace.org, to reset. Please take care of yourself and don't be afraid to seek help if triggered. Hey, everybody. Welcome to today's episode. And this is going to be a good one. So if you have ever struggled with finding the right therapist to help you along the way and along your BPD journey, you are definitely going to want to tune into today's episode where we're so lucky to be joined by SARA ABBOTT, and she has a whole bunch of very important letters that follow her name. And so I'm going to let her tell you guys all about those important letters. So hi, SARA. Welcome.
Hi. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for being here. And to kick things off, would you mind just introducing yourself to our listeners?
Yeah. Well, my name is SARA ABBOTT. I am a licensed clinical social worker. I live in Washington, the Pacific Northwest. And what can I say about myself? I have borderline personality disorder, and I work as a therapist. My background has included many different kind of positions in social work, and I focus a lot of my advocacy in the borderline world. I'm just excited to be here today and to chat and get to know kind of like what you're doing, Nicole, in your world as well, especially the differences between kind of like the West Coast versus where you're living, because I think there's a lot of differences.
Yeah, West Coast, East Coast battle.
I know. Definitely.
Biggie Pac.
I know.
If you know, you know.
Yes, if you know, you know.
And so I kind of have a little bit of background, obviously, because you and I know one another, but for our listeners, can you tell us a little bit about what led you into this very important line of work?
Yeah, I can. I'll be interested to know how your listeners feel about my response. I think the thing that I always say is like my career is sometimes a trauma response to my own, unique life experience that we all have. My childhood included a very interesting amount of suicide early on. So I like to think about my life as like 11 years of pre-suicide and then post-suicide. My mom was one of 7, and she was raised with some really interesting religious dynamics and a ton of substance use and addiction and child welfare and things like that. And so I was raised kind of observing the secondary impact of that. My mom was one of 7, as I said, and 3 of her brothers have died by suicide. And I really kind of like my formative years observed the trauma of that and also experienced the trauma of that, both in like the ways in which my family kind of fell apart and then also the ways in which my mother really wasn't equipped to go through that trauma and also like parent us. And so I did the kind of typical, like, I want to help people the way that I feel like I needed help or whatever. And it's only been in the last few years that I've really understood that that's not an appropriate reason for developing a career, but it's like the most common path that most of us take to being a helper in some way.
Well, the word that stopped me in my tracks when you said that's not an appropriate. Like, I want you to say more without, being offensive, but because I'm like, it's the most appropriate, from where I'm sitting. I'm like, if that isn't a validation of you fulfilling a mission, or calling, so to speak, then I don't know what is. But I'm curious as to kind of how the trauma response of it all, why you feel that informs, your perspective.
Yeah, I do think that that's like a hot topic, and I've had a lot of discussion with people about it. And I think when people are so invested in their careers, that can maybe feel or be insensitive to them or invalidating to them. I certainly know that like 10 years ago, if someone had said that to me, or even 5 years ago, that I would have been like, can we curse on your podcast?
Yes.
Yeah. That I would have been like, fuck you and fuck anything you have to tell me about my career. Now I have seen the way in which my own trauma is very, it results in a lot of transference that I have to really kind of manage with my clients. And I notice like, I love working in DBT. I love doing skills-based work. That is work that I don't like, the helping people learn skills to make their life more effective. That's an area in which I believe isn't impacted necessarily by like a lot of my trauma, because I would have needed to learn those things regardless of my trauma. But it's hearing the stories and listening to people and being like, I hear myself in your story, and how is my own experience influencing the therapy that I provide? Because I want you to do something different. I want you to not go down this path that I went down. And that's a really inappropriate, right? And so I've had to really watch myself being like, okay, Sarah, how are you going to not ask questions? Because we hold a lot of power as clinicians and therapists, and the way in which we ask questions or build treatment plans and provide support and make recommendations can give individuals a sort of stepping stone path if they choose to take it. I kind of call it brain hacking, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I try not to brain hack my friends.
Yeah.
But when you're a professional secret keeper and then question asker, if you're doing it through this lens of trauma that you've experienced, that you don't want other people to experience, you can sometimes take away their autonomy to choose their path.
1000%. Especially if they're not self-aware enough to be able to put it in perspective or reframe what's being said. Because the favorite person thing is very real for us. And especially when you feel like you can relate to someone who, has been on your journey and so forth, and you can then become like dependent on hanging on their every word. So what should I do next? So I can understand it being a fine line that you have to manage. And kudos to you for even being aware of it and trying to make sure that, you do right. First, do no harm, right? That you're doing right by your clients. I almost got the sense of like, that caring parent, that says, just wait till you have your own kids, and they don't want, because they're like in the middle of trying to prevent you from having that experience because they know how it's going to turn out. But by the same token, they're like, I know in order for them to be an independent, person, they need to go through this trial and tribulation, but it's a little different when it comes to mental health. We have to be a little more guarded with that approach. So,
yes, I love that analogy because that's not what we are as therapists. Our job is to just reflect back in a way that helps people gain insight, ask questions to capture what their goals are, and then support them on, that journey, give them skills, tools along the way. But ultimately, they get to decide where they go. And when I say an inappropriate trauma response, which I do want to note, everybody can get into the field regardless of why, right? It's how you learn to do the work in a way that's focused on the other people and not yourself and deriving worth from the work. But it took me a really long time to learn that if my clients that I'm working with have success, that's their success. And if they have failure, that's their failure. And it's not a reflection on my worth. But because I got into the field so young, which was really inappropriate, I got into the field because I wanted to experience worth and I wanted to experience caring for people in a way that I never felt cared for. So my own development was around, if I do well at this job, then I am well as a person.
Yeah.
And learning to differentiate those two things has been very difficult for me. I think I'm in a pretty good place with it now, but that's always my advice to people is go into the field. We need people with mental illness working in the field because they have this beautiful, unique perspective and ability to care in a way maybe people without borderline struggle to attain, but know why you're doing it and have a really good support system along the way. And you have to be in therapy.
Yes.
And not be in therapy as a therapist. If you are not in therapy as a therapist, that's a red flag.
Red flag. And some providers get so offended if you bring that up as part of your interview questioning with them when you're starting to, figure out if it's just a good fit or this a good match, And if you bring that question up, oh my gosh, I've had all kinds of reactions when I broached that topic with individuals. And I'm like, no, this is a good thing. You should be, I'm a career and leadership coach and I have my own accountability coach. Do you know what I'm saying? It's at the end of the day, because for that, the checks and balances of it all and trying to make sure that I'm keeping the focus on the client and how to help them win versus I can see this happening to them because this particular experience happened to me before in corporate America. I've got to leave all of that outside, when I step into a session, with my client. So I definitely get that. And the dance that we have to do. It's a dance for sure. You're in your response a while ago, it made me think about the next question I wanted to ask you was around your, what you call the holistic psychosocial perspective. Ooh, say that 10 times. And so, but it is an approach to therapy that you have listed on your bio. So can you unpack that a little bit for us in layman's terms?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that everybody has mostly heard about now is this old school, and it's kind of been debunked in a way, but the hierarchy of needs, Maslow's hierarchy of needs. It's kind of, if you imagine that, but in a circle where we cannot work towards emotional intelligence or healthier relationships or all of these things if we're not also including your physical health, your environmental health, how supported you feel in your community. And so the biopsychosocial approach really is that biology, psychology, and the social relationships. And so part of the training of being a master's level social worker versus a master's level mental health therapist or family therapist is, as a social worker, we're trained to look at all of those different kind of like worlds, essentially, environment, biology, spiritual health, financial health, all of these different things. And other types of professionals are trained to just think about like therapeutic approaches and how to apply them. And there's some great benefits to that, because people may have like a more kind of like in-depth understanding of like radical emotive behavioral therapy and, you know, all of these things. Whereas I'm kind of like, all right, well, before we can even get to that, what's happening at home?
Mm-hmm.
And that painting that full picture. I think that's really fun too, because I'm like, okay, well, like, let's problem solve the issues at home. You know, like if you're not getting a good night's sleep because you don't have like a mattress that works for you, what are the community resources available to get you a mattress? Like, we can't even talk about the other stuff. We can't talk about your sexual relationship until we have a friggin' mattress for you.
Yes, it's a holistic perspective. It's almost like even the lack of health, like healthcare. Like, I wish that if you have multiple things going on, right, with your physical health, wouldn't it be easier if all the specialists just got in a room and talked to each other? Okay, well, she experienced this symptom when she came, blah, 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 because that's how you get to the root of what's really going on, you know, with patient X, you know, and so forth. And that is, to me, it's almost like I want to say, like, duh, you know, like, where has this perspective been this entire time, and how much further along I feel like we would be, and some of us in our mental health recovery, if everyone took this type of approach that you're taking. It's like amazing.
Well, and that's actually called cross systems planning. And it's like, it sounds simple. Everybody get together, have coffee and bagels, and have the individual be at the center of it, saying, this is what my concerns are and this is what my needs are. And I feel like you psychiatrist and you therapist and you nutritionist are not talking. So can you guys talk? And insurance companies are like a huge topic of conversation right now, especially over there on the East Coast. I'm happy to be at the ocean on the West Coast, but insurance companies would spend a lot less money if they would just give providers the time and pay them like a case management fee to get together, but they don't do that.
Wouldn't it be? Sometimes I just think the overthinking or the back-asswardsness of things, it just, you know, I used to, when I was leading teams back when I was still in corporate America, and I would interview for certain positions, and if someone said to me, because we've always done it this way, like I was like, next, immediately, like I can't, because we need to like be thinking with the amount of innovation and technology that we have. It just surprises me. Like sometimes that the simplest of solutions we're still like overlooking or ignoring or even dismissing, because it's like, well, we've never done that, or we've always done it this other way. And I'm like, so speaking, I'm glad that you don't embrace that. Something else you don't embrace that in my 30-year journey, I've never heard, and I've seen some therapists, mental health providers, you name it, I've been there, right? But I've never heard anyone say, when it comes to therapy, we will both say the wrong thing sometimes, and that's okay. When I say I had to have this be one of the questions, because I'm like, how in the world did this become a best practice for you? Like, why is this an important boundary for you to establish with your clients?
Yeah. Well, therapy is messy. Like, it's not, you know, we have all these fancy words and then lists of strategies for how to like administer 12 different types of therapy. But at the end of the day, it's two people talking about how one person can live a better life. And sometimes they will ask something that will offend me, and I have to figure out how to navigate that. And sometimes I will ask something that offends them. And a big part of that is I say to all of my clients at the very first meeting, tell me about yourself, tell me about what you want, tell me about what you need. Ask me as many questions as you want about me. They will ask me questions and I answer in a way that's, appropriate within my kind of professional identity and what I feel comfortable sharing. And then I say to everybody, so I want you to know that I tell all of my clients, like, I'm a queer millennial with ADHD. These things inform my practice. I have some, strengths. I'm very skills-based. I want you to walk away from our sessions feeling like you have strategies to make your life better. But I also need you to know that I have some downfalls. I have ADHD. Sometimes it may seem like I'm not paying attention to you, but it's actually because, like, I'm looking down or I'm fidgeting, or I mess up scheduling sometimes. Like, those things are about me and not about you. And the other thing is like, I think there's a very kind of classic thought process that a therapist is going to, like, sit across from you with a notebook and a pen and, like, wear a sweater. And that's not me. That's not ever going to be me, because as someone with borderline, sometimes, like, I don't brush my hair. And of course, my clients don't know that I have borderline and all of these things, but unless they've Googled me and found my podcast, maybe they do. But to my knowledge, they don't. But, like, 8 out of 10 appointments with me, I'm going to be wearing a sweatshirt and my hair is going to be in a bun on top of my head, or I'm going to be wearing a beanie to hide the fact that I haven't brushed my hair. Like, that's just who I am. So I want them to be prepared for the mess of it all and feel comfortable showing up in their mess. Again, to still within these professional guidelines, but also, like, I have said things that have offended people, and I need them to feel comfortable telling me this is or isn't working for me. And I have a really good example. Recently, I was working with a long-term client who has experienced a loss, and we were talking about their grief, and I used the word honor, and she was pissed. And I could tell immediately, on her face. I was like, I noticed that your body language changed. Can you fill me in on, like, what just happened? And she was like, the word honor is bullshit. Everyone says that. Like, that's just, like, a thing that people say. And I said, oh my gosh, okay, let me take a second to, like, think about this. Like, I can understand how a lot of people would say, like, do X, Y, and Z to, like, honor so-and-so. What I really meant was this other thing, but I want you to know that I'm not going to use that word again. And I appreciate that you told me that.
So the average human would have interpreted that, and the defense mechanisms would have gone immediately up. What you did for that individual was such a gift, because that's honestly, without even knowing that person, probably all she needed was the recognition of how triggering that word was for her, and her opinion, which has probably been invalidated by so many others about how she felt about that. You giving her that in that moment, like, I see you, I hear you, and here's the solution going forward. To even further validate that I see you, I'm not going to use that word again in our conversation. Like, you know how many times that you have to sit in with a therapist and they're like, oh yeah, you have a daughter, right? And you're like, no, a son. You know what I'm saying? And it's like, they can't. And I get everybody has a workload. I've got a client load. You know what I'm saying? It's like, you got to remember little things that your clients say and so forth. But it's all about providing that safety, for that individual to show up every time. It's a lot, when virtual sessions came in, I was like, hallelujah, because trying to get my BPD self to physical with all of my other ailments to an actual session, that also exacerbated why some people would like, therapists would drop me because they're like, it's looking like, oh, she's not serious about, her treatment. Well, that's not it at all. You just need a safe space for people to come as they are, like you said, and also to not worry about the shoulds. Should I dress up today because I'm going to be on camera? Should I? No, I'm not feeling it today. And so therefore, and guess what? My therapist might not be feeling it either. And that's okay. And that's amazing. Amazing. Yeah. I love it.
Well, and the other thing I want to say about this too is and this is where kind of it comes back to, a big part of this is me and my mental health. I never want her to hurt, and I never want her to feel like I'm invalidating the grief. Mm-hmm. And I also don't want to lay in bed at night ruminating on, I noticed that so-and-so changed their affect or their tone or the topic. Oh my God, what did I do? And then go into this 3-hour shame spiral. And that's very unsafe for me as a person with borderline. And so then part of me saying this is messy. I need you to tell me what's happening for you in this process. And if this is working for you, then gives the responsibility back to the clients so that I can kind of practice this unless they tell me that I did something wrong. Mm-hmm. I don't need to kind of ruminate on things. And we should give the responsibility back to the people who are coming here because it is their work. We're not responsible.
Yeah. It's supposed to be person-centered, and that is something that it's even when you go for personal training, you know what I'm saying? You can tell when the person's just taking you through the same routine they've taken everybody else through, and it has nothing to do with your personal journey, but you're spending the same amount of money on these sessions. It's yes. What the heezy? So that is not something that brings joy. But, speaking of joy, that is something that I've had the pleasure of working with you and as my coach, and it has brought me a sense of safety and also just with everything that I'm navigating, knowing that I have this to look forward to with someone who gets me, but also gets the experience, right? So that I can show up as my authentic self. One of the things that I still struggle with, and I hear so many people that I talk to in our community struggle with too, is you'll say to me, you got to bring the fun back. You've got to go and experience some joy. And every time you say it, I'm right there with you, right? Yeah, let's do that. And then when we leave one another, I'm I don't really know how to do that. And even though I would say I'm one of the lucky ones in terms of where I am in my recovery is like a roller coaster and a spectrum, right? You know what I'm saying? And so when you find yourselves on kind of the lower side of that spectrum again, it's really difficult to remember what? I'm just trying to survive, and self-preserve over here. And what do you mean fun and joy? So what do you say to someone like myself who can seem a little resistant? We want to get there, but what's the first step to even figuring that out when you're in this BPD roller coaster thing?
Mm-hmm. I mean, I also love that analogy of the roller coaster, right? Because it'll sometimes send you for a loop or even a double loop and leave you hanging upside down for a minute. And you're like, wait a minute. This isn't what the plan was. Yeah, I think the way I talk about joy is I don't love myself, right? I don't know that I'm ever going to even get to self-like, but I'm working at neutrality, and neutrality is good for me. But I do believe in acts of self-love, and I see joy as an act. It's something that we cultivate, and we may not always feel joy in the moment, but we can be proud of the act of trying to create joy. But I think even prior to like doing whatever the act is, right? So for me, joy can be going on a walk with my dog, or it can be driving to the lake and getting in the kayak, but sometimes that one's too big. Sometimes joy can be just making a batch of cookies, or sitting on my back patio in the sun, or, you know, small, big, whatever. But before we even choose what the act is, I think we have to work at this concept of joy is work. And work sometimes feels hard.
Hard, yeah.
And we may not experience the actual joy from the thing right away, but we can be proud that we did it.
Yeah, because it's like one more thing I've got to do and figure out. That is Jedi. It's like, oh my God, yeah, you've got to reframe that immediately. It's not one more thing. And I even like so often I encourage my clients to use pros and cons list, right? And I'll tell them, you know, fold the paper, one side, do the pros first, right? And then flip it over, do the cons, and then open it up. And that kind of helps inform your decision making with taking the pressure off of you. I like that idea of breaking down things into like small versus large. Like, okay, what are the simple things that bring me joy, or even just a smile to my face, right? And then what are some of the bigger, maybe, you know, the childhood memories of it all, you know, when we used to go to the beach or travel or whatever the case may be. I think that's like a great manageable way that you can start to look at it and start to pick it apart a little bit, as opposed to, oh God, yeah, now I got to figure out joy too. It's like,
right. Exactly. It can be one more thing that prompts shame if you don't feel the joy from the thing. Whereas like, okay, well, let's just feel proud that we're even thinking about what I could do that could promote joy, and practicing this acceptance that we might not feel joy right away, but we'll still do the thing. So if the goal is, may I say a goal that is relevant to you?
Yes.
Okay. So if the goal is dancing, maybe the first step is like staying at home and writing a playlist or choosing a playlist of the songs you might want to dance to someday. Well, how cool that you know what the songs would be.
Yes, I love that. Because you know I'm not ready to leave the house yet.
But no.
But I'm working up my way there.
Yes. But you know the music.
Exactly. That's so great. Thank you for making it personal to me. I really appreciate that, because I can definitely resonate and see how that is something small. Because yes, do I still love that deep house music all day, every day, right? Do I have access to it? Yes, in my house. I can play it on YouTube or whatever, you know. And can I move around in my house even though I have mobility challenges? Yes, I can do those things. And it will bring me, like you said, a sense of joy, and even remind me of bigger moments when I was in absolute heaven and was able to stand in front of a speaker for 3 hours.
Yes.
So, yeah.
Exactly.
Love that. Well, you know, one of the things about our journey is that it's really, you know, overwhelming, exhausting, all the things, and confusing. And I know I can speak personally, and then obviously having talked to a lot of us in the community who shared the same thing with me, the steps to finding, you know, a therapist, right? The amount of energy that takes can really stop you in your tracks sometimes. And like we were just talking about, it's just one more thing. And with the amount of, oh, I don't cover it, I don't take insurance, you know, you have to pay out of pocket, I'm not taking any new clients, you know what I'm saying? You name it. Or then you find somebody and then there's not a match, or they do something that triggers you in the worst way. It can be so daunting that it really prevents, there's whole statistics on it that I have on the website, is because around how long it takes for someone, the average person with BPD, to actually get help. So if you're like on the edge, or you're having that kind of similar experience or journey, you know, is there anything that you would say from a coach perspective to say, you know, to encourage them to how they could work their way through that and keep going to find what the help that they need?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I'm glad you're talking about this. I hope it's helpful and validating for people who are like on that journey. There's a few pieces of advice that I would give, but are maybe a little bit biased. So I want people to continue on the journey that works for you. But if I were looking for a therapist again, there's a couple things. For me personally, I'm never going to work with a male therapist. That's all the way out. 2, I am looking for a younger provider, and I'm looking for probably a queer provider, or someone who has experience working with queer people. And you'll know that because they'll have funny things on their profile, things that are like very queer coded, like works with sex therapy, or works with like polyamorous couples, or things like that. That screams queer. Their profile has to say borderline personality disorder and dialectical behavioral therapy. 1000% has to say that. But where I would actually start would be more of a zoomed out search of, okay, what are the local DBT agencies in your area? Maybe they have individual providers there who just do therapy and not specifically like an intensive outpatient program. Or maybe you can call that agency and ask if they know of people in the community that are therapists that they work with, because then you're going to have this direct line of, okay, they work in the borderline community and they know DBT, and then they're going to have less bias.
Yeah.
The insurance part is another layer of all of that, right? Like, I would not start with filtering by insurance first. I would start by filtering in the way that's going to get you to the provider that you want to see, whether that's doing a search for DBT agencies or going on Psychology Today and then filtering by borderline, substance use, queer issues, divorce, like whatever all your things are, and then go through and see who has openings for therapy. But you know, it is going to be a long process, especially depending on where you live. I think if you're in the South and the Midwest, you're going to have a harder time than I have on the West Coast. I don't really know what's up on the East Coast in terms of BPD providers and things like that. And then, of course, if you have state-funded insurance, it becomes a little bit harder, but just keep going with it. And there's this term I recently learned, one of my clients taught me, actually, is called body doubling. Have you heard of this, Nicole?
No.
Okay, so body doubling is like when you want to give up on something or you have a hard time starting something, you ask your friend, sibling, partner to come sit by you while you do this annoying task that you have to do. So like if I needed to do something on my computer, like I was finding a new therapist, I would ask my husband to come sit by me and do whatever he's going to do, paint, play Pokemon, be reading on his laptop, whatever. But just having someone next to me then makes me accountable to not walk away from my computer.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love that. And I think this, I'm liking it to similar in coaching where we mirror, it's called mirroring, but it's more in real time. And it's the coach usually initiating, can I be a mirror for you, right now? What I love so much about this body doubling approach, it's the person's also taking ownership of, no, I need this to happen right now in order for me to not be triggered or to kind of stay on this path or completing this task, etc.
Yes. And it's informal support too. Like you don't have to wait until your session.
So if we could be here for hours and hours so talking about and exchanging, and I wish we could and just hit the record button and just keep going. Get in our Christmas PJs, how Stephen Colbert does. It's an interview where you lay down side by side and we just talk.
I love it. We totally could too. We would talk forever.
But I know that I want to be mindful of your time. I'm so grateful for you being here today. And I just want to open up the floor to you to say, is there anything that we haven't covered yet in regards to this BPD land that you feel is important for our listeners? The floor is yours.
Well, I would say, and again, this maybe sounds funny, but I would say I'm working at this and it's difficult. Give yourself permission to not see yourself through the lens of having borderline. Like you are just a person and you struggle with emotion regulation and all of these other things, yes. And like you are a person who loves house music or who loves to go kayaking. And, my husband is a person who loves art before he's a person with autism. Like we're people before we're any of our diagnoses. And because I live in this mental health world and because I have a borderline podcast, I have a really hard time disconnecting my identity from the identity of mental health. And I think that as much as we should be doing that advocacy work, we deserve to be seen as more than that. That would be my advice.
Thank you. Big virtual hug for that one. I love that so much. Thank you very much. Message received. And hope everyone else caught a nugget or two. So how can the folks get in touch with you? Because they need to.
Oh my gosh, you're so sweet. So I have a podcast. It's called the Bold, Beautiful Borderline Podcast. You can just search that wherever you get your content, and that's at boldbeautifulborderline.com. And then I am on Instagram at Borderline from Hell, and the podcast is at Bold Beautiful Borderline. So I think those are the main ways to get in touch with me. I'm not on TikTok. I know the kids are doing TikTok. I can't get myself to be doing the videos. That seems like way too much work.
Listen, don't get me started on the social media thing. It has been the finding an intern for that one. Hey, shout out to the interns. If y'all are looking for some good college credit, call me. Have I got an internship for you? It's called social media manager.
I would love. I hate playing that game, but it's the game we have to play to find people, right? Because nobody's walking around the world with a sign saying I have borderline, so we have to do the social media thing. And I'm grateful for it in a lot of ways, but it's messy.
It is. That is the perfect word, messy. So, well, thank you so much. I appreciate it again. And you'll have to come back and chat for a little longer next time.
Absolutely. Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you for tuning in today. We hope you caught a nugget or two. Don't forget to join us each week for guest interviews, first-hand experiences from BPD warriors, and learning about tools designed to aid you along your recovery journey. And most importantly, don't forget to say your BPD mantra daily. Dear BPD, I no longer have room for you to control my life. My warrior spirit will take it from here. Till next time. Wishing you an abundance of healing, self-love, and grace.
As today's chapter of I Can't Even Kill Myself Right comes to a close, we want to remind you that you are not alone in this journey. And don't forget to take a moment to explore the showmegrace.org website, our initiative for those moments when life feels overwhelming, all dedicated to helping you press pause on the chaos and embrace a moment of peace. If you find yourself in crisis or standing at a crossroads, remember, help is just a phone call away by simply dialing the crisis hotline 988. or contact your mental health provider and working your crisis action plan if you're considering harm to yourself or others. Your story doesn't end here. Your next chapter is yet to be written. Stay connected with us. Your insights, questions, and personal narratives fuel this journey. Wherever you tune in, be it Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or another platform, your engagement shapes our mission. Share your recovery journeys or pose questions for future episodes by reaching out through our website. Your voice could light the way for others or even feature alongside us as a guest or co-host.